This year's NFL draft, we saw a ton of wide receivers see their name called, but which rookie wideouts do you need to know about for fantasy? We're going to break it down. Round one alone had several names, but let's start with, I guess we can call it the big three, the guys we knew would be top 10 picks, and they were. That's Marvin Harrison Jr., who went, not surprisingly, to the Arizona Cardinals. Malik Neighbors is a Giant now, and Rome Odunze joins Caleb Williams with the Chicago Bears. So, I'm going to assume these guys are high-end dynasty picks everywhere. Are they also valuable in redraft? What's your take?
Yeah, Marvin Harrison, smash in redraft, smash in dynasty. I mean, if you get Marvin Harrison this year, do cartwheels, he should be great. Don't need to say more about that. Malik Neighbors, still love him in dynasty. Got to hope at some point the Giants are going to fix that quarterback position, but you got to be nervous in redraft this year. I saw a stat, the most receiving yards any receiver has had with Daniel Jones, 770 yards. I think Malik Neighbors can do better than that, but don't be surprised if he has like a Garrett Wilson type of season where he's good, but underwhelming, but still love him in Dynasty. And then Odunze, kind of the same thing here. Not worried about the quarterback, but he's in an offense with Keenan Allen, in an offense with DJ Moore. Got to worry about his target share year one. But year two in Dynasty, I love Odunze because Keenan Allen, again, is 32. DJ Moore getting up there in age as well. Don't be surprised if within a year or two, Rome Odunze is Caleb Williams' number one wide receiver.
Yeah, with the Marvin Harrison thing, just don't overthink it. I mean, at this point, anybody who is doubting him is just trying to find a reason to. We knew he was going to be the top receiver prospect in this class for an entire year, and we knew he would go to Arizona, and he did. Yeah, this is a guy I'm now pretty convinced, now that we know for sure where he's at, is going to be worth a top 15 fantasy pick in redraft leagues. And of course, in Dynasty, he should probably be the number one pick unless you're in a super flex league, in which case I guess you're excused if you want to take Caleb Williams. Now, as far as Caleb Williams' new number one target down the road, Rome Odunze, I think he's going to be a little undervalued because people see Keenan Allen, DJ Moore there, and think Odunze is just going to be a distant third. Not so fast, right? Sometimes, just like we saw last year with CJ Stroud going to Tank Dell on the regular, sometimes those rookies can form that connection sooner. And we know Keenan Allen has been banged up quite a bit over the last couple of years. So, yeah, it'll take some time. But Odunze, I think, is worth taking in redraft leagues. And I actually have him number 2 as far as receivers in Dynasty because Malik Neighbors, I got some concerns here. Look, Chris, I know you called him going to the Giants. That was your prediction. It happened. I'm still a little shocked by that because I've got to take a look at this franchise and think, don't you need a quarterback before you worry about what receiver he's going to throw to? Daniel Jones is pretty clearly not the answer, but also there are concerns that maybe his neck is not going to allow him to even play long term. Who is the backup here? What's the best case scenario? How effective can Neighbors be with any quarterback the Giants are going to have out there in the field this year? So in redraft, I will just say I'm definitely fading Neighbors big time. I was taking him in the 3rd round in our early mocks, and now I won't even pull the trigger probably before the 6th or 7th, and even then, I'm just too worried. So I'm definitely concerned about Neighbors, and I don't know if that will really make me want to take him in terms of a top 5 pick in a Dynasty league either. I could be overreacting, but right now, that's just how I'm feeling. Now, the later half of the first round, we did have to wait a little while to see another receiver called, but then it was Brian Thomas Jr. going to the Jaguars to replace Calvin Ridley there. Xavier Worthy is a Chief. You know everyone's going to be all over that. Xavier Leggett in Carolina, and then Ricky Pearsall, very interestingly, was taken by the 49ers. So, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, let's start with Leggett. He's a guy I'm probably just not going to be on in Dynasty or redraft, really. I thought he was okay as a prospect. I thought he had some potential, but this is not the landing spot I love for him. I mean, are we really expecting like this offense and Bryce Young to just take a huge step forward? I think Deontay Johnson is still great in fantasy. He'll be a target monster. I just don't see Leggett getting enough volume here, so pretty much fading him. Ricky Pearsall, I love this landing spot if they end up trading one of the other two guys, Debo or Ayuk, but until then, nothing more than a long-term stash. So in redraft, probably not going to expect much from Pearsall. But in Dynasty, he could still have value, again, if either this year or next year they move on from one of those guys. Then, of course, there's Xavier Worthy, who everybody's going to be freaking out over because he went to the Chiefs and he's a speedster. He's this burner. And look, he's going to be a guy I'm going to definitely target in my best ball drafts. And I think in Dynasty, he's well worth a pick because he's attached to Patrick Mahomes. But in redraft, I think he's going to be a real headache. Sometimes he's going to hit those home runs. And then some weeks he might only get, a handful of catches and do nothing. So best ball, Dynasty, yes. Redraft, not so much. And then finally, Brian Thomas Jr., I think he's going to be slightly less of a roller coaster than Xavier Worthy, but also a guy, again, best ball, definitely. Dynasty, I'll take some chances. Redraft, if I can get him late enough, yes. Otherwise, I'll probably pass.
Well, let me start off with Xavier Leggett also. This just doesn't seem like a great match in terms of fantasy goodness. And look, obviously, Dave Canales and Carolina thought this was the perfect match for them because they told him, hey, if you're there at 33, we're taking you. And then they moved up to 32 just to make sure they got him because they knew Buffalo wanted a receiver. So maybe this fits that offense, but it doesn't fit for me in terms of fantasy upside. The jury is still very much out on Bryce Young, and even though he's going to improve this year, and Leggett might do some things in that offense, what is his true ceiling? This wasn't one of the top wide receiver prospects that we had, and look, I don't know if he really deserved to be a first-round pick. He's going to wind up being a guy that is still, I think, a project for another year or two. Now, Ricky Pearsall, is he going to need a year or two to develop? Or does that, all of a sudden open up when Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel gets traded? That's probably not happening because it hasn't happened. If it was going to happen, wouldn't it have happened by now? Look, this was an insurance policy here against Ayuk or maybe Deebo leaving after this year because a trade does happen. Pearsall, I'm going to like him in Dynasty, and I actually will say I think he slips into the first round conversation of Dynasty rookie drafts now, but I don't want to get carried away. The same thing goes with Xavier Worthy. Any of these receivers, whoever they are, whatever receiver was taken by the Chiefs was going to automatically go into the first round. Xavier Worthy is that guy now. But I also don't want to underreact to this pick. Honestly, he's fast, he can be productive, and at some point, Travis Kelce is going to go away. At some point, Rashee Rice might get suspended. Worthy isn't necessarily going to be a number one receiver in fantasy at any point, but he's going to have some value. And then Brian Thomas Jr. is the guy. I honestly don't exactly know what to feel about him because he wasn't my favorite prospect. This is a good landing spot, but it's not the best landing spot. I'm going to probably say I'm avoiding in redraft, and I can't view him as a first-round pick in Dynasty because I do have those other guys, not Leggett, but those other guys ahead of him. Now in round 2, things slowed down a little bit, but we saw 4 receivers go off the board. Keon Coleman went to the Buffalo Bills. Ladd McConkey then immediately to the Chargers. And then we saw Jalen Polk become a Patriot to pair up with new quarterback Drake May. And Donnie Mitchell was probably the biggest faller here. He wound up being a Colt. What does this mean?
Yeah, I'm going to start with Ladd McConkey. I loved this landing spot for Ladd McConkey with the Chargers. He's going to fill that Keenan Allen role. And yes, they're going to be a run-heavy offense, but they're still going to have to throw the football, and he's competing with Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnston. To me, I'm taking McConkey in redraft and Dynasty, no questions asked. A.D. Mitchell and Jalen Polk, I kind of feel the same about them. These are guys that, okay, sure, maybe in best ball, if they fall far enough, I'll take some shots on them, or maybe in redraft, I'll keep an eye on them on my waiver wire, but I'm probably not drafting them. But in Dynasty, I like them because, look, Drake May, even if he struggles year 1, you got to like him going into year 2 and beyond to hopefully develop. And A.D. Mitchell with Anthony Richardson is great. I just wish, he didn't have Michael Pittman to contend with. So I like these guys in Dynasty. Redraft, probably not going to get a lot out of them this year. I think Keon Coleman's going to be the tricky one for me. I did not like him as a prospect at all, but he landed in Buffalo with Josh Allen, so you can't just sit here and pretend like there's no potential for him. It's not a terrible spot. They don't have a lot of pass catchers. Again, best ball, sure. Dynasty, if he falls far enough, sure. Redraft, I don't know. I'll probably pass and just hope I didn't make a huge mistake.
Well, I'm going to start with the 2 guys I'm probably off of now. First of all, the guy who landed in the worst spot, Jalen Polk. Went a little earlier than expected, but really, this whole Patriots offense, come on, it's going to take at least a year, if not 2, because Drake May, sure, one of the top quarterback prospects, but super young, still a little bit raw. It's going to take time. New coach, new everything here. And Polk, himself might not necessarily be the guy who comes in and becomes a number one receiver. They've got a lot of work to do there. I'm going to wait and see. So I'm going to definitely be off of him in redraft, and even in Dynasty, not going to be one of my top targets. And then Keon Coleman seems like he landed in the best possible spot, becoming Buffalo's receiver that maybe will try to replace Stephon Diggs. Look, it has to be the right guy. Keon Coleman is not one of my favorite prospects. In fact, I think this is going to lead to more aggravation for Bills fans when they say, hey, we need a receiver and this is what we got. I could be wrong here, but again, not going to move away from my initial evaluation. Doesn't look like a guy who's going to be regularly able to get separation from NFL defensive backs. We'll see. Now, as far as the other two, I think McConkey and Mitchell are the ones to look out for. Mitchell is in a good, not amazing spot for the Colts, but he fell a lot farther than we thought he would. Now it seems like he might have that chip on his shoulder to prove it. That is all we needed from him because he's got the tools physically, he's got speed, he's got the skills. We just hadn't seen that. And if there's one thing people were worried about with him, it was his motivation. And now he's got that motivation to prove that he should have been drafted higher. I'm not saying this is the next Amon-Ra St. Brown or anything, but I think we're going to see a lot better results for Mitchell than we will from these other round two receivers. And then McConkey just seems like a great fit there. Maybe the upside isn't tremendous in that offense, but he might wind up being the Chargers' leading receiver as a rookie. Several more receivers went off the board in round 3, starting with Malachi Corley to the Jets, another weapon for Aaron Rodgers, and then Jermaine Burton as Cincinnati Bengal now, very interesting. Roman Wilson, finally, the Steelers take a receiver, and that's who they went with. Jalen McMillan to the Bucks, and then Luke McCaffrey to the Commanders. What's your favorite and least favorite pick here?
I mean, my least favorite is probably Luke McCaffrey to the Commanders. I thought he was not good as a prospect. I'm trying to be nice here. Don't have no interest in Luke McCaffrey in any format, and I really don't have any interest in Jalen McMillan. I did like him as a prospect, but with the Bucks, with Mike Evans, under a new contract, Chris Godwin, I don't know, uncertainty. We still got Baker there. I don't know. I'm pretty much out on him. I will say Roman Wilson. Not one of my favorites either. Not going to take him in redraft. Probably not going to draft him in Dynasty. Best ball, sure, he may have some games, but that's probably much it. So those guys I'm pretty much out on. Now, the next guy I will say Jermaine Burton. I love this landing spot for Jermaine Burton. Not so much this year, though. I mean, unless they trade T. Higgins, then I'll be all over Jermaine Burton. So probably not a guy I'm going to draft in redraft, but in Dynasty, I love this because going into the next year, T. Higgins almost certainly gone. Jermaine Burton was another prospect I thought was very underrated, one of my favorites. Love this landing spot. So 2024, maybe not, but 2025 and beyond, I'll love him. So go get him in Dynasty. And then, of course, Malachi Corley. I love this spot for him. I know he's got some weaknesses as a prospect, but this is a guy, you just get him the ball and let him do his thing. There's risk here, but there's also upside. So I'll take shots on him, redraft, best ball, and Dynasty.
Well, out of all the round 3 receivers, there's only one guy I really like in terms of liking him as a prospect already and liking the landing spot, and that's Jermaine Burton as well. I love this pick because he's tied now to one of the better quarterbacks in the league in Joe Burrow, and he can contribute right away because even if T. Higgins is still there for at least one more year, remember, Tyler Boyd, he's gone. He's a free agent. Doesn't look like he's coming back to Cincinnati. And then, the guys that they've got behind him have just been kind of role players. Trenton Irwin will play at slot once in a while. Sure, he might be the starter to start the season. But come on, Burton is going to come on and he's going to take a role at some point. They're going to have to look for life without T. Higgins after this year, assuming he is still there this year. And Burton is just one of those guys that is a playmaker. I'm really surprised he slipped this far. So he's somebody I'm all over in Dynasty. I might take some shots on definitely in best ball, maybe even late in redraft. Who knows? Malachi Corley, I think, will be the opposite. He's not going to be a big playmaker. He'll probably work in some screens and some short dump offs and things. Get the ball in his hands, see what he can do with it. This isn't necessarily going to be a prolific pass offense anyways. So I think he'll be okay as terms of a prospect. Never probably more than a wide receiver 3 type. But, there's a role for him. There'll be a place for him somewhere on fantasy rosters, especially in dynasty leagues. Not interested in McCaffrey, not interested in Jalen McMillan, not a guy I was high on anyways. The landing spots didn't do those guys any favors. And then Roman Wilson is, to me, the quintessential best ball only type. Every once in a while, he'll pop off with a big game or a big play, but otherwise, I don't see him really being a consistent contributor. Then only 4 receivers to talk about in round 4. Finally, the reunion between Troy Franklin and Bo Nix happened. They're both Denver Broncos now. And then Javon Baker was another Patriots receiver taken. Devontae Walker is a Raven. And then the 49ers pulled the trigger again on receiver with Jacob Cowing out of Auburn. What are your thoughts on these guys?
I'll just make this one simple. The only one I have any interest in here is Troy Franklin, and that's because he went to Denver with Bo Nix. I mean, he fell in the draft, but this is the spot we wanted him to go. He can fill that Jerry Jeudy role, play that flanker with Courtland Sutton as the X. He's reunited with his college quarterback. Is he going to smash? Probably not, but I think he'll be good enough. So redraft, best ball, dynasty. Yeah, I'll take shots on Troy Franklin. The other guys, nah, hard pass on all those guys.
I'll say, look, a lot of people thought Franklin would go at least in round 3. It seemed like Denver was a natural landing spot for him there. They waited and still got him. Look, I know Franklin is a little undersized, and there's some concerns about that offense in general. But could this be any better? Not only getting his same quarterback, but he's got a legit shot to start from day one because there's Courtland Sutton and then a lot of uncertainty in terms of receiver. They need playmakers there. I think Franklin is still going to be undervalued even in dynasty leagues. Javon Baker, I actually think this is someone to keep an eye on in terms of that long-term view for the Patriots. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if he is more productive than Jalen Polk long-term, but again, this is a dynasty-only special, and the other 2 guys, I think I have zero interest in. And there's always somebody from the late rounds that shows up and becomes valuable in fantasy. If there's somebody who wasn't drafted in the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft that you might take a shot on, who would it be?
It'll probably be Brendan Rice out of USC who went with the Chargers. It was really hard to pick somebody after round 4. Not a lot of guys I like, but I could see him filling that Josh Palmer role eventually, which, again, this is going to be a run-heavy offense. It's not going to be an offense that throws the ball 40-plus times like we're used to, but if he can carve out a role in that Josh Palmer offense and you can get him late in your dynasty drafts or off your waiver wire in your redraft leagues, that'll be worth it.
Well, maybe this is too obvious, but how about a receiver for the Dolphins, right? Malik Washington, and this is somebody that, honestly thought would go in round 3 or 4 anyways. He graded out pretty well, got speed, lots of speed, but this is actually a great fit because we know that Dolphins offense, as good as they were in the passing game last year, struggled to really find a number 3 receiver who they could count on regularly. Cedric Wilson was a bust as a free agent. They had guys like Braxton Berrios who would show up once in a while, but really nobody who was consistent. I don't know if Washington will be that guy, but he definitely could immediately slot into that slot role and be a contributor. And so with that big playability, definitely makes sense. Even if he had gone to a different team that could use him, I would still be interested, but now I'm even more. Now that we broke down those rookie receivers you need to know about, what about the running backs? Already did that. Check out this video if you haven't already.